Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Martin. I'm a transition teacher for the NEISD School District. And as part of our monthly family engagement workshop, we're so pleased to have Allison Schaberg with a Consolidated Planning Group joining us today to talk about a very important topic, planning for special needs and the steps for that planning. Ms. Schaberg?
Thanks so much for having me today. It's nice to partner with you. As you said, Allison Schaberg here with Consolidated Planning Group. We are a holistic special needs planning firm. We do a lot of webinars on a pretty regular basis on topics surrounding special needs. And so today we're going to be talking about some key steps that you should take as it relates to planning and really how to protect and maximize your child's future. When we have kids that are transitioning, and transitioning can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but we're kind of talking about kind of crossing over that bridge of childhood into adulthood. We're talking about age 18. There's a lot of things that change. There's things that have been the same for many, many years. There's a lot of things that change. And I, for one, I wear a lot of hats. So I eat, sleep, and breathe special needs, individuals with disabilities. That's all I do. I live it both personally and professionally. I have 4 kids and I have 2 kids that have disabilities. And so what I found is when we were transitioning with our older daughter, we've just started that transition process with a younger one. But it was difficult. It was I'd call it unnecessarily difficult and hard. And so a lot of our webinars are really geared to empower you and to give you the tools and resources that you need to advocate for your loved one, to get the things that you need to have in place, and to not make the mistakes that other people have made to make, maybe disqualify for benefits or not qualify for benefits, et cetera. So a couple of the things we're going to start today. There's a lot of things that we're going to cover, and I always say in our webinars, and I've put this in the chat box, our contact information and our YouTube channel. We do have a Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel that you can subscribe to for free, and all of our past webinars are on any particular topic are out there. So you can kind of search the ones that are most appropriate for the step that you're on and the stage in planning that you're on, and kind of watch those. The problem with what we've got going on as parents is every single one of these things that need attention. They're whole webinar topics, and it's a whole hour. So we can only go so deep and wide. So first things first, we talk about a letter of intent when we're talking to our families, and we think it's important to develop a letter of intent for your loved ones with a disability. And what I would call that, I also call it a family love letter. And we do have a document for this. It is a form fillable PDF. It's actually 19 pages long. But just think, as a parent, your loved one with a disability, you know more about your child than anybody could ever possibly know. But if you're incapacitated or no longer here on this earth, do other people know that? Very specific things. Some things are less important, like, but diagnostic dates. Are the diagnosis? What medications do they take? Names, address, and phone numbers of doctors? What schools do they attend? What county were they born in? I mean, it could just go on and on and on about religious preferences. You could just go on and on and on. But the bottom line is as parents, we just know this stuff. It's like the back of our hand. But if somebody else was stepping into our shoes, do other people know that? Even people that are close with us, a future caregiver, maybe it's a sister or a brother or another family member, do they know all of these things? Or would they be trying to search for things, especially if we have kids that are nonverbal? So this is an important component. If you don't have one, you should get one. You should start working on your letter of intent, and we do recommend that you update this I say a couple times a year. Some people's conditions, their conditions are very fluid and they change quickly. If that's your case, then you might want to update it a little bit more frequently. But we have a lot of other families that have loved ones with disabilities, and the disability is about the same. It stays about the same. It doesn't not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. So you can use your judgment on that. We talk about working with a special needs planner to help you formulate a plan. Your situation is specialized. So we don't suggest that on a specialized situation that you work with a generalist. We've seen a lot of mistakes along the way. And we're talking about generalists from an attorney perspective, generalists from a planner perspective. In general, there's a lot of accidental mistakes that can happen in your planning and your documents. Your documents may not be qualified in the eyes of the Social Security Administration as a legitimate document under the POMS, under their rules. It's important to make sure that you have money in the right buckets so we can maintain eligibility for state and federally funded programs. So those are things that we talk about on a pretty regular basis. At Consolidated Planning Group, we're nationally certified as Social Security advisors. We're also members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. We have specialized software that's going to help us determine with your Social Security statements exactly how and when, as parents, you should pull the trigger on your Social Security to maximize benefits for both spouses, if you're married, as well as any kids that we have that are considered disabled adult children under a parent's record. So those are some of the differences of a special needs planner versus just a generalized financial planner. A lot of the times, we also talk about the differences between what we do and what a special needs attorney does, because a lot of times we get calls all the time where people, want to talk to us about legal documents, and they get calls all the time for people that that say, hey, look, I need a future care cost estimate. I don't know how much money we need to set aside, but I do know that my child has care needs for the rest of their life, and we want to plan for that. So the truth is that you need both. So the attorneys are really going to be the paper, the legal documents, and we're going to be the money, the funding. Where does it come from? What buckets does it sit in? And how do we make sure that we leave it in such a manner that our loved one does not lose benefits and or Medicaid? So when you get started in this process, we want you to gather all the necessary planning documents. What do these look like? These are your Social Security statements, your full earnings records. And these come from your SSA.gov login. The Social Security Administration, you can create a username and password on their website, and you can download your Social Security statement and your full earnings record. And whether you have a special needs child or not, I do recommend you do this because sometimes there are errors on your earnings reported to the Social Security Administration. So you should check this on a pretty, at least an annual basis. Other planning documents are other legal documents that you might already have in place. If you have guardianship, healthcare power of attorney, wills, trust, etc., and all your statements. What kind of coverage do you have available to you through your employers? This might be group health insurance, life insurance, disability, long-term care. What kind of coverage do you have outside of your employers? We're also looking at brokerage statements, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, pensions, 403Bs. Don't forget old employers. A lot of times those slip through the cracks. But we want you to think about how you want your vision. I want to know about you. How do you want your vision to look for your retirement? Because retirement looks different for families that have a child that's going to have care needs for the rest of the child's life, right? So having that balance of how it's going to look for you and your retirement and what your hopes and dreams were for after working for 25 or 35 years, and then also that vision that you hope for your special needs child. I should have mentioned earlier, for the most part, we mostly can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there. So if you have questions today, we do want you to put your questions in the chat box, and we are going to answer them just as many as we can. Ryan's going to be looking at that chat box for me, and we'll read those out. And also, you don't have to take notes of everything that I'm saying, because we are going to send an email later today with a copy, a PDF of these slides, and any links that are in them will work for you. So I just wanted to save you a little bit of writing there too. Okay. So some of the things we had kind of talked about a letter of intent a little bit ago. This is kind of some examples of things that might be on the letter of intent, and again, it could go as deep and wide as you want it to go. But just imagine if you weren't you and you were stepping into your shoes and the care that you provide for your loved one with special needs, does anybody else know that? And thinking of those things that you take for granted, that's just in the back of your mind, just the tip top of your mind, that nobody else would ever know. These are the things, for some of our kids have meltdowns. I don't care how old they are. There are things that make our kids, things go well. I use the term at my house, wheels on the bus, wheels off the bus. And so we are trying always to keep the wheels on the bus. And but in your letter of intent, you want to make clear what makes things fall apart and how to fix it if they do, because those are key things in their journey. Ryan, do we have some questions?
Yes, they're asking about when the documents will be shared and any websites that you'll be sharing regarding special needs attorneys.
Yeah, so we don't put a website out for special needs attorneys. We do have special needs attorneys that we refer to, that we know are good, we know they're honest, we know their prices are fair, all across the state of Texas. So we're happy to make that referral. But usually those referrals are very customized to the specific family that we're working with and kind of what their needs are, because everybody's needs are a little bit different. So we're happy to do that. And then later today, at the latest tomorrow, you'll get an email with a copy of today's slides and anything else that we talked about or promised in the webinar. And our contact information will be in there as well. Okay, so when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? So again, we have entire webinars on the special needs trust, entire webinars on guardianship. So the special needs trust, bottom line with that is it's going to preserve future benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. We're going to talk more about SSI and Medicaid and how much you can have and not lose benefits. But a special needs trust is one place that you can have money above the means-based test that the SSI does, that will, you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust is the bottom line. Another place that you can have money that won't be counted against you for SSI and Medicaid purposes is an ABLE account, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. So let's talk about guardianship for a second. So if we're transitioning, we're thinking about, does our loved one need guardianship? There are some rules of thumb. There are some other things that maybe is not as black and white as you would like it to be. Not everyone needs guardianship of their loved one. Okay, some people it's definitive. You definitively need guardianship. The ones that are a little bit more definitive, typically your loved one's IQ is below 70. They're considered intellectually disabled. There could be any number of other reasons, but oftentimes, basically, if your loved one does not have the mental capacity to understand what they would be signing if they signed a power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney, then guardianship or partial guardianship, those conversations might need to happen. You can start the guardianship process 6 months prior to the child turning 18, so you can start the process, and then the guardianship could go into effect once they turn 18. If you've missed that window, your child is much older, it doesn't matter, it's okay. You can start that guardianship process later if that is the case. There is a such thing as partial guardianship, where maybe you may have guardianship over where they live or their ability to drive, or maybe you have guardianship over their medical decisions. Whereas a full guardianship, they're losing their right to vote. They won't be able to drive. They won't be able to get married. There are a lot of things they can't do with a full guardianship. So in the state of Texas, what the general consensus is, or basically the law is the least restrictive, most appropriate for what they refer to, and then we hate this word, is the ward, like a ward of the state or what ward, that's what they want. So most appropriate least restrictive for your loved one is what they're looking for. And you're going to want to work with a qualified attorney to prepare these documents. So when it comes to special needs, just like I said, your situation is specialized. I know that, and we work with a lot of really smart people, but there's a lot of stuff when it comes to special needs that it's not a do-it-yourself or project. It's not hire your brother because he's an attorney. If he doesn't have any background in special needs, he has a good probability of messing up your special needs trust. All attorneys aren't created equally. All financial planners aren't created equally. And you really want to work with somebody that's truly nuanced with special needs, because it's just that important. Do we have an additional question?
No, there's not one.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so how will My Child's Care be funded? How are we going to fund future care for our loved ones? And this is something, in almost all of our webinars, we talk about this because there's a high level of confusion. And I'm sorry, I needed to update that to 841. But there's a high level of confusion when we start talking about SSI and Medicaid, and then we start talking about Social Security, disability, and Medicare. So first and foremost, a lot of families, they don't qualify for SSI and Medicaid for many, many years. Even though your loved one is disabled, if they're under 18, the qualifications for SSI, it is a means-based test. And the means-based test is basically looking at, does the individual have more than $2,000 in their name? Do they have more than one house or one car? And if your child is a minor, then they're looking at your assets and income. If once your child turns 18, and a lot of people don't know this, but once they turn 18, then it's based off of their assets, not yours. So you may have your loved one that has basically qualified for nothing all of these years, and when they turn 18, it's highly likely that they're going to qualify for SSI and Medicaid. In 2022, the amount of SSI did go up to $841 a month. It was $794 last year. It is $841 a month now. And then Medicaid. So Medicaid is basically health insurance through the state. Social Security, also known as Social Security Disability, also known as SSDI, is a worker-based program. You pay into this program. So as workers, we pay into this so that one day when we retire, then it's going to pay us a monthly amount for as long as we live. Or one day, if we become disabled, then it's going to pay us Social Security disability benefits. So one thing that is important to establish with the Social Security Administration is if your loved one's disability started prior to age 22. And this is a magic age, prior to age 22. So we talked about on the left box here, we've got the SSI and Medicaid. That's a means-based program. You have to be indigent and you have to be disabled. Okay, that's SSI. And then the second box, we've got Social Security Disability. And for this one, it's a worker-based program. You have to pay into the system. And then you get benefits out of that later in retirement or on disability. But our kids that don't work don't pay into the system. So basically, unless they're considered a disabled adult child under a parent's record, then they may not ever get Social Security disability benefits. So magic age 22. If your child's disability started prior to age 22, it didn't matter when you file it. So if you're late, you're not late. You just have to have proof that the disability started prior to age 22. Then your child can be considered a disabled adult child under a parent's record. And what that means for you and them is that when you retire or go on disability, your disabled adult child is going to be eligible for 50% of your record. So if your Social Security, your monthly Social Security is $4,000 a month, they're going to switch over to Social Security disability, and they're going to get $2,000, 50% of whatever yours is, and yours is not going to be reduced for this, okay? That's going to continue as long as you live and as long as your loved one remains disabled. Upon your death, If your loved one is still disabled, their amount will be increased to 75% of your disability benefit and will continue as long as they live and remain disabled. And you can switch between parents. So like if they're never going to get both, 50% of both parents' records, but you can select which one is the better benefit. So if one parent has a higher Social Security benefit than the other, then you would want the disabled adult child to fall under that parent. If one parent retires early, you might want the child to fall under that parent. And then 4 years later, the other parent retires and that record is bigger, then you can switch your disabled adult child to the other parent. So there's all these little one-off stories. That's enough to make anybody crazy. We have whole webinars on SSI, SSDI, and all of these things. But, you know, again, we want to have an established special needs trust for their future care. And this is a way we can have more than $2,000 for their benefit. A lot of times special needs trusts are funded with current assets left over upon your death that were left over from your retirement. Oftentimes people fund their special needs trust with life insurance, where the beneficiary of the life insurance is the special needs trust for the benefit of your named child. And so that's another way that people fund their special needs trust. And of course, an ABLE account. So we talk about special needs trust and we talk about ABLE accounts, entire presentations on each of those topics. A lot of times a question that people ask me on a pretty regular basis is, why should I have an ABLE account and a special needs trust? Isn't one or the other just fine? Number one, you cannot leave money to the ABLE account. You can leave money to the special needs trust. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the ABLE account can pay for things that a special needs trust cannot without a reduction to SSI and Medicaid. And so basically what I'm talking about here is housing. An ABLE account can pay for food and shelter. A special needs trust can pay for food and shelter as well. However, there will be a 1/3 reduction if you pay for food and shelter out of a special needs trust. There will be a 1/3 reduction to their SSI. And whereas if you pay for food and shelter out of the ABLE account, there will not be a reduction. So that's one reason. So we always kind of, talk about, some of the other things that people talk about, who's going to care for my child when I'm gone? We want to help you, and we want you to develop a future care plan now that'll answer these questions. Develop this plan where while you're of sound mind and body and you're thinking these things through. Don't wait for the crisis to happen or some kind of major health event to happen. We actually are going to put a webinar together. I had a gentleman that called me this year, kind of panicked. He had called me from California. Both his aunt and uncle had died, and he had a special needs cousin. And so they're all in California. He was here in Texas, and basically there was nothing in place. It was a big, big disaster, and it was very hard for him to navigate this. And there's a happy ending to the story, but what I will tell you is it was very difficult for his cousin because he had always been with his parents, and things kind of fell apart relatively quickly, and he's kind of here by himself, and there was not a plan in place. So have a plan, know what that plan is, revisit that plan. There is help out there. Sometimes families come to me and they say, look, I've got nobody else. Now what do I do? There is nobody else. I hear that, or the other people that the other somebodies are not somebody that I want to do, I don't want to do this. So sometimes in the example where there is nobody else, you can consider residential facilities. There are a lot of wonderful residential facilities in the state of Texas. And I'm not saying here's how you can institutionalize your loved one. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you should tour these places because they are really awesome. And the people that work there are awesome. And the residents there, what you'll see, what I saw when I toured, is they're happy. They love their life. They have friends. They have community. They have jobs. Their job might be big. It might be small, depending on their disability, but they're needed and they're important. And these places are pretty awesome. Some of them, not all of them, and this is just a few. We have a whole list, some that take waivers, some that don't, et cetera. But some of them do have the ability to be the successor guardian for your loved one. So if you find yourself in that situation where there is nobody else, then you might want to look at some of those facilities. Some of these waiting lists can be 5 years or longer. So you want to check on that to see where things stand. Put yourself on these lists. Most of them, definitely before the pandemic, they wouldn't allow you to put yourself on the list unless you toured with them. And then they went to virtual tours. I think most of them are getting back to in-person tours now. But this is the same. The same holds true. So if you're thinking transition, what's after high school? Is it an 18-plus program? Is it a transition program? There's a lot of them out there. Some of these have long waiting lists as well. So you're going to want to check those out too. And I never want to step on anybody's toes here when I talk about this, but we do want you to make careful consideration before naming siblings as a future caregiver. And this is, so I know like the love of family is big, and you know, little Johnny's sister loves him, and she says she wants to be the future caregiver. Unless there's this huge age difference, like 20 plus years or something, it's probably not a realistic task or job for a sibling. We like siblings to be in a non-obligatory role. We want the siblings to be able, a lot of times some of the siblings, some of the siblings need therapy themselves because they've always been the back burner, you know, because there's always been so many things going on with your loved one with a disability. But we want the siblings to achieve their hopes and dreams. And so as parents, know that I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. I'm a parent too. But what I am saying to you is think about how you were when you were 18, 20, 25, 30. Did you want to go to college? Did you want to have a house? Did you want to get married? Did you want to have a big career? Hopes and dreams. And that's what your other kids have too. And you have to evaluate your situation to think about, would your other loved one be able to achieve their hopes and dreams if they were saddled with the responsibility of being a caregiver for their sibling, or could there be some issues there? So just check that out. No, we don't have an issue. A careful plan. So it falls to the siblings, it falls to the cousin or the second cousin out of state when there is nobody else, right? But what we like to see is that these siblings have a great non-obligatory relationship with their sibling, and the trusts are funded to pay for this future care, so there's not a financial burden to the sibling. And then sometimes the siblings are successor trustees, so they're managing the care, but there is a caregiver, there is a plan, and the plan is being carried out, and the sibling is just there to see that the professionals that have been hired are doing what they're supposed to do. Okay, waivers. So the Texas Waivers interest list, we actually did a presentation on this morning on the Texas waivers. We hear about the interest list all the time. There are multiple interest lists. Sometimes people think that they're on the list, and they are on one list. And so we've got some different numbers here and a link. So what is a LIDA or a LIDA? It's I wish someday somebody would just tell me if it's LIDA or LIDA, but anyway, the Local Intellectual Disability, Developmental Disability Authority is what I'm talking about here, your local authority. There's one in every county, and this website right here is going to allow you to put your zip code in, and it'll tell you who exactly your local authority is. Probably a lot of you already know who your authority is, but this will tell you who it is. To get on the waiver interest list, the Medicaid waiver interest list, you're going to call your local authority, and that's going to be for HCS, Texas Home Living Community First Choice. And then there's a separate 800 number for MDCP class, DBMD, and then there's also a separate phone number for the Star Plus waiver. So these waivers are really designed, let's see if I can move here. Excuse me. They're really designed to waive off the cost of some of the care for your loved one with a disability. And unfortunately, in the state of Texas, the waiver interest list is very, very long, and the waiting list can be more than 15 years. It's a long time, is the bottom line. But the waivers are all require that you maintain Medicaid eligibility to be able to get a waiver. Each of the waivers have some different criteria as far as, qualifying for the waiver. And what the waivers are designed to do is to waive off the cost of care so your loved one can maintain home and community-based services. In general, it is now believed, so 30, 40, 50 years ago, I was actually in a Texas Partners in Policy Making as kind of a grassroots task force and helping change the law in Texas more favorably for individuals with disability. And the interesting thing is we all are told to get on the list, but we really don't even know what exactly we're signing up for or what it's for. But what we learned in that program was that 40 and 50 years ago, if we had a loved one with a disability, we were clearly just supposed to institutionalize them. That's the way that it goes. And then today, really the way of thinking now is that's not true at all. That the belief is that home and community-based services are best. Having access to community, to loved ones, being in their own home or in their community is going to be, basically setting them up for success and having the best outcomes as opposed to institutionalization. So these waivers are all designed to keep people out of institutions or help people get back to home and community-based services that may have been formerly institutionalized, okay? These services, they cover a lot of different things. Here's some other names of some of the different waivers. A lot of times people don't know all the names. There's so many of them. But these, they will often provide therapy. You can think of equine therapy, music therapy, art therapy, OT, PT, speech therapy, you name the type of therapy, even massage therapy will cover a lot of those. Might cover transportation. A lot of them will cover attendant care services like our caregiver service in your home or in a small group home. It will also sometimes provide respite hours. So these are all things that are good in helping you find balance in your life with a loved one with a disability. And it also can defray some of the costs that are associated. Some of these waivers, they all have different budgets. Okay. But some of these waivers have a budget as big as $140,000 a year, right? So as I like to say, that's not nothing. So that is something that, over the course of a year, over the course of many years, it could really help your family. So just keep that in mind. So when should you apply and what do you need to apply for? So we think about SSI. So apply for SSI the month of your child's 18th birthday. Appointments should be scheduled a few months in advance. Just so you know, it's a happy day. The Social Security office is opened back up April 7th. They've been closed for 2 years, but in Texas, they have opened back up for the general public. If you so much want to submit yourself to the agony of sitting there all day anyway, they're very, very busy. But you can call if you know your child's turning 18 and schedule for the month that they turn 18. You're going to want to have evidence that demonstrates the child's disability began prior to age 22 to qualify as a disabled adult child on one parent's record. Just so you know, for 40 years, the Social Security Administration has been using DAC, disabled adult child, that terminology. And in the last couple of years, they've changed it up to CDB, childhood disability benefits. So it's the same thing. So if you hear CDB or DAC, it's kind of the same thing. They're leaning more towards using that CDB, but because it was DAC for 40 years, a lot of people still call it DAC. So that's the other confusing thing. So if you have felt confused as you're looking at terminology or what you got to do with SSI and Medicaid, there are terms that are synonymous. And then there are terms that sound similar that are not synonymous at all. And so if you've had trouble kind of keeping those terms straight, you're not alone. So another thing that you want to look at is you want to gather the medical history. This is going to be the physician's name, address, phone numbers, diagnosis history, and medications. For us, they ask about the medications and what they were for. They did not ask the dosages. They didn't care about that how frequent or what the milligrams were. They didn't care. And I always say, consider chatting with your PCP first and reviewing their records. And so what I want you to do is when you're applying for SSI and Medicaid for the first time, I want you to put your best foot forward. I want you to do a little work on the front end. So hopefully on the back end, the answer is yes, and it gets approved sooner versus later. And what is sooner versus later with the Social Security Administration? You should fully expect that when you apply for SSI and Medicaid, that it is going to take 3 to 6 months to get approved. And if it's any faster than that, then you should do cartwheels and flips, and you should write a book because nobody else knows how to make it faster than that. So there are some presumptive conditions, like Down syndrome is a presumptive condition, cerebral palsy is presumptive, AIDS. There's a list of presumptive conditions that you can look up. Those applications usually get approved faster and money will start coming in sooner, even while it's in the disability determination. But when I say consider chatting with the PCP first and reviewing your records, the reason I'm suggesting that is that I want you to look and see what's in there. There is something called the Social Security Blue Book. I'm not sure if I have a slide in here. Here are some of the presumptive conditions that I was just talking about. Intellectual disability is also a presumptive condition, so I should mention that one. So total blindness, total deafness, those types of things. So if it's presumptive, they'll basically, DDS will approve it. That's the disability determination. I don't even know what services they can get that approved for you and can get the payment coming in a little bit quicker. But what I want you to know here is that the Social Security Blue Book, I'm not sure if I have a slide on this or not, but the Social Security Blue Book, you can Google this. It's basically a medical impairment guide that tells me if I'm applying for SSI and Medicaid, I can look up my child's conditions, my adult whatever conditions, and it's going to tell me exactly what I'm going to have to prove, what those medical records are going to have to prove for them to be considered disabled. So I do invite you to look at the Social Security Blue Book and look up all of their conditions. Clearly, a lot of our loved ones have multiple diagnoses. Look up the big ones first and then go down to the smaller ones, because it could be any one of them that's going to have them fall into that category as disabled. Okay, so I think I talked about this a little bit. I'll just hit on it just one more time. So again, if their disability started prior to age 22, they can be considered a disabled adult child under a parent's record. They'll be entitled to receive 1/2 of the parent's benefit. And this also applies to minor children that are not disabled. After 24 months, so basically mom or dad turns on Social Security, your child is already 18 or over. After 24 months, they will be entitled to Medicare. So SSI comes with Medicaid. SSDI after 2 years comes with Medicare. So a lot of times our loved ones will be dual qualified for Medicaid and Medicare, okay? And again, that amount is 50%, and when the parent passes away, it goes up to 75%. And these, we do these Social Security calculations, and this is especially important. We see a lot of families that one parent historically stayed home, or maybe they worked less. They provided caregiving services. Well, with the Social Security Administration, in those examples, in a married couple, a spouse can be drawing off of their spouse's record. So the spouse has got, we've got husband and wife. Husband has his Social Security benefits on. Wife is drawing off of his benefits, and the child is eligible for benefits under the disabled adult child status. There are family maximums if a non-working spouse is also drawing from a spousal record, and there are also some other little caveats for families that have more than one child with a disability, which unfortunately we've been running into a lot in the more recent years. Okay, so here is just some of the terms we talked about: SSA and the Social Security Administration, Social Security Retirement Benefits. We've got RSDI, which is Retirement Survivors Disability Insurance. SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. We talked about the Disabled Adult Child, the CDB, the Childhood Disability Benefits, and then we have DWB, Disabled Widower Benefits. An adult receiving Title II benefits is a beneficiary. And this is actually updated for 2022 is 1350. So when you're filing an application for SSI, the person does need to be medically, for SSDI, they do need to be medically disabled, fully insured, and basically they're not working, earning more than the substantial gainful amount. And for 2021, it was 1310. For 2022, the amount is 1350 per month. So if a person is working and they're filing for Social Security disability benefits, if they're making more than $13.50 per month, and I'll update these slides before we send them out. If they're making more than $13.50 per month, they will be denied, because basically in the eyes of the Social Security Administration, if they're making $13.50 or more a month, that is substantial gainful activity and they're not disabled. Okay. So I think we've basically talked about everything on here. The other thing is as far as being a disabled adult child under a parent's record, one key thing that you have to know. So yes, their disability began prior to age 22, but if they get married, they're going to get knocked off that status. So you got to think carefully on how that's going to go down. So if in that example, your disabled adult child is drawing off of your record, he's getting $2,000 a month. He decides to get married. He's going to lose that status, and he's no longer going to be a disabled adult child under your record, and he's not going to be able to get it back in the future either. So if that is going to happen, you want to make sure that your loved one that is working does have the wherewithal to earn a substantial gainful amount and pay into his own Social Security, because he's not, otherwise later on down the road, as far as turning on Social Security later, there'll be nothing, because remember, that's a pay-in system. Okay, so we are actually working with a family right now that has lost benefits because of that. So we want you to make sure that you've got your assets and your child's assets in the appropriate buckets. We talked about the Special Needs Trust. We talked about the ABLE account. We also want to make sure that from a beneficiary perspective, that you do not have your special needs loved one named as a direct beneficiary in anything you have: life insurance, investment accounts, bank accounts, old 401ks, 403bs, pensions, etc. The way to do that is to have it to the Special Needs Trust for the benefit of your named loved one. If you leave money directly to your loved one, they're going to have more than $2,000 in their name. They're going to disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. So that is a really important factor there. And if you've done this, it's okay. You can change it. It's a change of beneficiary. You can request the form. You can request it for free, fill it out for free, and send it back in and get it updated. Now, it isn't free to set up a special needs trust. So you'll have to hire an attorney to set up the special needs trust, but you can fix this. But a big thing that we see all the time is grandma and grandpa, they mean well. They have saved up a lot of money that they'll never use in their life, and they want to leave it to their grandkids. Their financial advisor has no background in special needs, and your parents go in and say, hey, I want to leave money to little Johnny. And he says, okay, and he fills out the change of beneficiary form for little Johnny, and then grandma and grandpa pass away, and then he gets the money. You can't just disinherit this money and say, okay, well, I'm just not going to take it. it starts getting complicated. You have to hire an attorney. It has to be redirected by court order to a first-party special needs trust that has a Medicaid payback. A third-party special needs trust does not have a Medicaid payback. So when we're leaving money to our loved one's trust, we want to leave it to a third-party special needs trust without a Medicaid payback. So if you are taking notes, just make a note to dust off your beneficiary designations, look at them. How do we have this set up? If I die, who's going to get the money? And then there's a such thing as a contingent beneficiary. So if I die and my beneficiary that I have set up is already dead and gone, then who's going to get the money? And what a lot of families have done, and if you did this, it's wrong, but you're not alone, because like 95% of people do this. They say that if they're married, that if something happens to them, each other is going to be the beneficiary. And then basically if I die and my spouse is already dead and gone, then I'm just going to divide it equally amongst my kids, because that's fair, and parents want to be fair, right? And so, and that's a good idea. It's a good idea if your kids are grown, over 18, and can financially handle large sums of money. It's also a good idea if you don't have any disabled kids, which you probably do, because that's why you're here. So what I'm telling you is never name your children outright if they're minors. If they're under 18, don't name them outright as a beneficiary, because if you do and you die prior to them turning 18, basically what happens is from the time that you die, the money sits in trust until they turn 18, and then they give them all the money, no holds barred. They can do with it whatever they want. And most 18-year-olds don't have the wherewithal to handle large sums of money. So it's better off to set it up in a trust, or a testamentary trust for your non-disabled children, a special needs trust for your disabled child. And then those documents are going to spell out exactly how and when and where the money is going to go. Okay. ABLE accounts, and so ABLE accounts is for achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. The disability in the example of the ABLE account has to have started prior to the child turning 26. Is basically where that comes from. So as far as an ABLE account, is achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. And the bottom line is you can put money into this account. It is $16,000 a year for 2022, $12,880 if they're working, an additional $12,880 if they're working. And they can, if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. So these, you can pay for school, you can pay for tutoring, transition services, medication, an iPhone, it could be a vacation, it could be food and shelter. There's a lot of things that you can pay for out of an ABLE account. We can help families get this set up. And here are some, I just kind of hit on those already, some examples of what an ABLE account can pay for. And here are some examples of things that a special needs trust can pay for. And just by the slide alone, it basically looks like a special needs trust can pay for a lot more things than an ABLE account. And that's not necessarily true. But remember, the special needs trust can't pay for food and shelter unless you want a reduction to your SSI and Medicaid. But a special needs trust can buy a house outright. Okay. And so I think, let me go back just one here. There we go. So our next slide, our next slide is just some programs that we're aware of, educational options post-high school across Texas. There is one on here that's not Texas. Lynn University is actually in Florida. So where are we going? What are we doing? Is it a transition program? Are we going to go to higher education? Is there a certificate program that might be available? We have entire presentations on educational opportunities, options, paying for it. for individuals with disability that lives on our YouTube channel. We've even done a panel where we've actually had some of these people from these programs on there to talk about their program. Basically, they give a who, what, where, when, why, who do they serve, what do they do, what is their program, is it a certificate program, a degree program, what have you. So look at this stuff early. Some of the slots are not, there's not very many slots when it comes to some of these programs. They might have 3 or 4. Some of them might have other more than that. Some of them are on this list. They don't have a specific program, but they actually do have a really great Office of Disability. So when it comes to our loved ones and other programs that are out there, being aware of the offices of disability and whether or not they're doing a good job or not should be a deciding factor on some next steps. So a summary of some of the topics that we've discussed, and I know that we've discussed a lot, so I hope you don't go away from this webinar and feel like your head is spinning. But so we've kind of talked about the necessity of developing a special needs care plan, those future care cost estimates of how much do we need to fund the trust, how is that going to affect our retirement, do we have enough to retire for 25 to 35 years and fund a special needs trust for our loved one. We talked about the Texas waivers and interest list, SSI and SSDI, knowing the difference between them and when to apply. Some ABLE accounts. We talked about beneficiary designations, special needs trust, some ideas on how to fund them, a little bit on guardianship and some of the residential facilities out there, and some of the waiting lists we talked about a little bit further, and kind of the length of time of waiting lists. One thing I want to mention on those waiting lists, some states, people ask me this every week, what if I'm getting a waiver and I move to another state? If you're getting a waiver in Texas and you move to another state, the sad news is you don't get to take that waiver with you. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, what if I move from another state and I have a waiver in that state, or their waivers are better, can I keep it? And the answer is no. If you are considering moving in your retirement, sometimes people consider moving in their retirement because they, for taxes, but since we don't have any state taxes here, that's not necessarily true for us. But consider states that have good programs, good waivers, short waiting list. And I do like to mention, again, Texas is very, very long on our waiting list. Also, Florida. Florida is a popular spot for retirement, and from a tax perspective, from a son perspective, but from a disability perspective, it's bad. Their waiting lists are very, very long, and their services are difficult. They're few and far between, and most of the families that are living in Florida wished that they had services from other states. Okay. This is our team here. I always just like to share, and we have four others that we need to add on here as well. But I'm oftentimes the one that's doing the webinar, and I always just like to share some faces and names with our team. We're all certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. We're happy to help you on your journey. We're happy to work with you on the planning that you've done so far, to have a better understanding of what you already have in place, give you some guidance going forward on where you should go. Also, make any of those referrals, for a specific attorney that you should work with. We're happy to do that as well. All of our consultations are always free. This link in this presentation will take you to a scheduled booking thing where you can check out a calendar and book something if you have something personal that you want to talk about as it relates to your loved one. We're certainly happy to chat with you, and we want to help you on your journey. I hope you feel empowered today. I hope you walk away from this and you got at least three nuggets that you can take and put in, kind of put into play as to what you're doing with your loved one. And if nothing else, if you know where our YouTube channel is and where you can get some additional information, we partner with all kinds of professionals. We partner with Andy Hardwick from the Social Security Administration, attorneys on the Special Needs Trust and the Guardianship. So we don't just blah, blah about things that we don't do. We actually just partner with the people that actually do them. And so there's a lot of good Q&As on there where people just like you ask really great questions during these webinars. So you can hear those as well. So I've got 125, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Ryan. If we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We don't have any questions in the chat, but the family participating has a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you had talked about earlier. Don't put your son or your daughter who has a name and disability as a beneficiary on your trust. Why? Because if you're setting up a special trust for your future planning, and you want everything to go to him, why wouldn't you want to put his name on trust? Or did I just
No. I didn't say the special needs trust. I said you do not want to name them as a beneficiary on life insurance, 401ks, any investment accounts, bank accounts. You don't want to name them outright, because if you name them outright, it's going to go directly to them, and they're going to have more than $2,000 in their name, and they're going to disqualify for SSI and Medicaid because they will not meet the means-based test. And you have to stay Medicaid qualified for any of the waivers. They're all Medicaid waivers. So the way that you do that, and that's a great question. I'm glad that you asked it. So thank you for asking that, because there is confusion. A lot of times people think that they have a will and trust, and whatever you say in your will is what goes. The truth of the matter is on financial accounts, investments, brokerage, life insurance, pensions, retirement accounts, things like that, it goes to whatever beneficiary you set up. So if you name a person outright, they're going to get the money, they're going to disqualify. So the way for them to get the money is you do set the special needs trust up. And then the beneficiary designation, when you change your beneficiary and you get that form I was talking about, it's going to say, instead of John Smith, it's going to say to the special needs trust for the benefit of John Smith. So that way, when it pays, the money goes into the special needs trust for his benefit, not to him outright, and he maintains his eligibility for Medicaid, Medicaid waivers, and SSI. Does that make sense?
Okay, with like your insurance or your investment plan, whatever, or if I pass away or my policy, I would just coordinate with my lawyer or whoever, make sure that the proceeds from my insurance coverage or death benefits will go into the special needs trust fund that is already set up for my son or daughter.
Yes, and most of the attorneys, the ones that we refer to, most of them help you with that process, but that's one more step. So once you get that special needs trust set up, then you need to go through the process of changing and updating all of your beneficiaries to the wording of the name of the special needs trust.
Okay,
so that's the next step once that trust is set up. Thank you for asking that question and seeking clarification. It is confusing.
That's a little bit more clear, because like I said, we have our policy for me and my wife, and like I said, we retirement, and we have everything going to our son. It's just in case something happens to us, and we already have a guardian set up, and with our will saying the guardian can only execute but don't touch the benefits in regards to our estate or it needs. But like you just clarified, we just need maybe work, like I said, you have a list of special needs attorneys that we say, hey, we like to set up a special trust, and this is what we want to do is make sure our insurance coverages or death benefits or whatever goes to that special needs trust to our son or daughter, and that way it doesn't disqualify him for any kind of home care services or Social Security.
That's right. But that is a perfect example. And we see stuff like this every single week where a professional did do these documents. It was a lawyer, but they didn't have a background in special needs. They didn't have any knowledge on the special needs side of it. Every single week, professionally, I see documents that are wrong that you paid for, right? And that is why it's just so important, because these benefits are so important, and these waivers and Medicaid and all of these other things that we've talked about today. That's why it's so important to have this stuff set up properly and really get a second set of eyes on it. What do we already have in place? What have we done? What do we think we have? What do we really have? And how is it going to distribute in the event that something happens to us? Because we're trying to prevent surprises of $250,000 being accidentally left to your special needs child. So it's a good thing because it's going to help their care, but it's a bad thing because it's going to make them lose the benefits unless you hire an attorney and have it moved into a first party special needs trust. So thank you for that.
Like you said, after end this meeting, y'all be able to provide us the list of those special needs attorneys that y'all work with.
So we don't put out a list for the special needs attorney from this meeting, but if you reach out to us directly, we'll have a better understanding of where you are, what county you're in, what your needs are, and then we'll make a specific recommendation of 1 to 3 that we know would be helpful in your journey for you specifically. So we do have them all across the state, so we prefer to do it that way. Because everybody's, we have people from all over the place that are attending our webinars. So we don't know specifically, it would be a long list. But what
Yes.
I'd like to say is, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for having us today. It's certainly been a pleasure. I'll update those numbers on the slides, and we'll get that out to everybody who registered. We will get an email out to everybody, and we will also include the letter of intent that we talked about. We had a form fillable PDF letter of intent. We'll go ahead and put that out there to everybody as well. And I wish all of you well on your journey. If we can be a part of it, if we can help you any way, certainly reach out. We'll be happy to meet with you. And all of our consultations are always free. So thanks so much. Thanks again for partnering with us.
Thank
and
you so much.
everybody have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.